Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and with us this evening is Mr. Charles Mooney, who has asked me to call him Chuck, so that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Please.
And Chuck is one of 4 candidates running for the single seat in this year's Select Persons race. So, Chuck, what we always do, especially with people who are appearing for the first time on the show, is we ask you to give us a little bit of biographical information, and once you've done that, then we'll get into the discussion. So I turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Very welcome.
So I am a 37-plus year resident of Chelmsford. I've raised my family here. I have 2 adult children, both of which graduated from Chelmsford High School. I have a granddaughter who is absolutely the apple of our eye right now.
Spoken like a true grandfather, I can tell you.
There's nothing like it. I am a New England native. I was born and raised in Lexington, moved to Nashua for just a very brief time, and then landed in Chelmsford. By way of education, I have a bachelor's degree from Boston College, a master's degree in chemical engineering from University of Lowell, and an executive MBA from Suffolk University. I work for a company called Xylem, Inc. We do transport, treatment, measurement of water. So water issues are near and dear to my heart. I've spent the last 20 years in trade compliance. I am a licensed customs broker, like one of the other candidates, and having 2 licensed customs broker in a race is kind of like having lightning strike.
It's all right. If the town needs to import
But
something, we're in good shape.
Exactly. You've got 2 people to call.
Right.
I'm very comfortable in a regulatory legal environment. That's been the last 20 years of my career. Prior to that, I was started as a research chemist, worked my way through operations, marketing, and finally into compliance.
That is a very well-rounded and comprehensive background, and I have to tell you, I admire anybody who gets academic degrees in what I call the hard sciences, because these are not easy things to do, and chemistry is a very difficult thing to do, and it was really the only course I ever had trouble with in college was organic chemistry.
Okay.
And I think the only reason I passed is because the professor took pity on me. And he knew I was working very, very hard. So I squeaked by, but it was tough. So that's great. So you have been in town for 37 years.
Yes, I have.
In the same neighborhood?
Most of the time. So almost 37 years now in our current residence. We've been, same neighborhood. We started in Williamsburg. We were there for about a year and a half, and then moved to a single-family home.
Good. Good. So you certainly are well-grounded in the town, and you've got 37 years worth of observation experience, if nothing else, watching what's going on in town. So that brings us to the question, which we ask every candidate, is why are you running, and more specifically, why are you running at this time?
Okay. So it's a simple question with a complex answer. I'm running as I'm reaching a point in my life, my career, where I want to give back. I want to give more back. I've been involved in youth sports in Chelmsford. I was a coach for Little League, basketball, girls softball. I sat on the board of directors for both girls softball and basketball. I've seen changes in the town over the years. I'd say mostly good changes, but I feel like Chelmsford, that we can do more, and I want to be part of that. Okay. So, and at this time, it's, career-wise, this is a good time for me to do it. Prior to this, excuse me, I had a very heavy travel schedule that just wouldn't have allowed me to participate at the right level. I mean, commitments like this, and as you mentioned, I'm running for select board as well as town meeting representative. You need to be present. You need to listen to people. You need to be available to participate.
All very, very true sentiments, to be sure. This particular election, although we are running, we'll be running against one person. This is a single seat election, and for the benefit of the audience, the cycle is 2-2 and 1 because we have a 5-person select board. So, and it's a 3-year term. So, in 1 year we have 2 people running for 2 seats. The second year we have 2 people running for 2 seats, and in the third year we have a one seat election. So, when you run against one incumbent, should you win, you will of course be displacing that incumbent. So, would you shed a little light on that? So you're running against somebody that has a 6-year track record.
Yep.
Is there anything in that person's service that made you think, gee, I really should be sitting on the board?
No, this was more a call to be on the board. You know, when I look at this race, I'm running against 3 people. You know, certainly an incumbent is a force to be reckoned with. I agree with that. There's nothing in Ken's record that says, no, he's got to go. I'm sure he's done a great job. But what I see is I bring a fresh perspective, a different perspective, or it would be my own perspective. I view things as a business. It doesn't matter to me what it is, whether it's a business, whether it's a municipality, whether it's a nonprofit, it's a business. And there's certain things, I view it through that lens, and I'd like to be able to bring my perspective to the board. I'm not saying they don't have a business perspective, but they wouldn't have my perspective or my background.
Okay, that's a fair comment, and I think any town is well served with a 5-person board, each bringing a particular perspective that's relevant to the municipal administration. So certainly your regulatory background would be very, very helpful on the board. There's no question about that, and your general business perspective. Although one thing that I think you will find out, okay, as you go forward, as you get more involved in town operations, is that although there are some parallels between private and public sector, things are done differently in the private sector, and you can't always make a one-to-one match, okay? So, you know, there has to be some accommodation for that particular thing, but I think your background lines up very well, so that's good. Now, let's say it's April and you are now elected and now you're on the select board. The first and most important thing you will do thereafter is decide who's going to be the board chairman.
Okay.
And that's sort of a joke because, well, not a joke to elect a chairman. It's a very serious thing. But I was on the select board many years ago.
Right.
And the town manager at the time told me, he said, now, just before the election, he said, you know what the most important thing you're going to do on the board is? I said, no. What is it? He said, it's decide who the chairman's going to be.
Okay.
And I thought he was joking. Okay, so I get elected, and come to find out, that was pretty intense. Okay, it was very intense. So I thought to myself, you know, Bernie, I think he might have had something there. Okay, but anyway, can you give us perhaps how you, as a new person coming on the board, how would you view your role as a select board? What is the primary, in your view, what is the primary role of a member of the select board in terms of how they act, in terms of how they relate to the town manager and so forth? So if you could give us a little bit of that perspective.
So to me, the select board collectively and individually are the leaders of the town. Leaders by example, by deed. I have not met a leader yet that has not led as much by influence as they do by authority. And I think that's a strong part of what I do as a leader within Xylem. It would be a strong part of what I would do within the select board. My role in the initial stages would be to understand the facts, provide my opinion, and drive to consensus. Now, that's not to say that, people can disagree. I think, healthy disagreement is good. It's good to have those conversations. At the end of the day, though, we'd need to leave with consensus, and that would be, I would want to continue to drive consensus within the board. I would want to continue to lead by influence and example as a member of the board, as an individual, as well as the board as a whole.
Is there, from where you sit now, is there anything specific that you think is lacking in terms of board initiative or methodology and how they go about achieving their goals and objectives?
I can't say that. I wouldn't be. I'm not in a position to answer that question.
Okay, that's fair.
I need to be much more involved and much more in depth. While I've attended a couple of meetings, I still have a ways to go before I'm an expert. I think there are some critical initiatives facing the town, and these aren't new to the town or the board. Certainly the sewer issue, the capacity issue, is something that needs to be wrestled to the ground, for lack of a better term. I know there's a lot of discussion on that. I know there's been work on it, but it's something that needs to be settled. I think the other thing, and I've heard this mentioned a couple of times now at the board meeting, is developing a strategic plan. And that to me would be that to me is mission critical. I know we have boards that do, there's a master plan, there's a planning board, there's a school board, there's a et cetera, et cetera. But I believe a strategic plan that articulates our 3, 4, 5 strategic imperatives would be worth its weight in gold. And I would want to see that driven to a successful conclusion. I've read the vision and value statement. It's a great statement, but it doesn't say how you're going to get there.
Right. And it's an interesting point that you bring up, because coming from the private sector, and as somebody who's had 43 years experience in the private sector, in roles not too dissimilar from your own, I would have to say that this is totally a private sector thing. I mean, you start off with a strategic plan. It could be a 5-year plan, which is what my companies always did, that kind of thing. And whenever you get people who are steeped in the private sector experience and they get into the public sector, they're not comfortable if the organization is lacking a strategic plan. But if you go back and you look at other municipalities, this is a relatively recent thing. You go back 15 or 20 years, and I can't think of a single city or town that had a strategic plan. It just wasn't done. So now it seems that more and more municipalities are getting into that mode. And I know, having watched the select board meeting, they talked about, I think they're using a template from the town of Shrewsbury.
Yes.
Okay, and so that's very interesting. And I like that, because I think it's always good to cast about and see if anybody else has already done this thing. As they say, why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
If somebody else has done it, maybe we can use that as a starting point and we can build on that. So I think that's very good, and I agree with you, by the way. I think the town would benefit substantially by pursuing that.
I think my observation over the years, and I mean, I've been doing strategic planning for 40 years, more successful recently than at the beginning. But I think a well thought out, well executed strategic plan can really help galvanize efforts, whether it's a business or a municipality. I also believe the first one isn't going to be right, but it's a good start.
Yes.
They become living documents, and by the time you think you're done, it's probably time to start over again.
Well, as you know, in private business, we would do a 5-year plan, and it would be revised every year.
Absolutely.
Okay, to take into account new information and changing circumstances and so forth. And the other thing is, and we'll talk about this, this is a good segue
Yep.
to get into the role of the select board is defined by the town charter, which is, as you know, the charter is basically the town's constitution. And under the so-called strong town manager form of government, which is what we have, the select board is primarily a strategic and policy-making board. That's what they do.
Yep.
They don't run the town operation,
Right.
okay, although there are people in town that think they should, but that's not
Okay.
that's not the way we're structured,
Right.
as you know. So the things that you're talking about now fit into that mold very well. So what that tells me is that you do understand our structure and how it is supposed to operate.
So when I looked at, excuse me, Chelmsford's governance, you know, I said, okay, the select board is the executive branch. The town meeting is the legislative branch. When I read the town charter, it validated my assumptions that that's how
Exactly.
it's structured. But that goes back to some of my earlier comments where, you're right, the select board doesn't make every decision. They can't. I mean, no executive can make every decision. They need to empower the town manager. The town manager needs to empower the people that work for them. But that's where it comes back to influence. You know, you wield as much through influence as you do by direct authority. So I think the select board has a role to influence the town, I'm going to call it the operational parts
Correct, yeah.
of,
I would agree with
of the
that.
town government,
Yep,
whether it's the DPW or, you know, whatever, what have you. I mean, even, you know, there's a requirement to meet with the school board twice a year. There's a requirement to interface with the planning board. Those are all necessary things. 2 meetings doesn't make a relationship. I mean, it's something
Right.
that needs to occur over time, be nurtured and developed. So, you know, what I was going to say on the town meeting side, I really look at that. That's the feet on the street. And that's why I think the town meeting representative is critical to my education in Chelmsford. When I go into something, I like to go in feet first and, you know, all in. So, to
Get
me,
your hands dirty, as they say.
absolutely.
Yep, yep. No, I think you and I are in 100% sync on that. Many times I've had assignments given to me, managerial assignments, where you can pick up this group, you can pick up that group.
Yep.
Fine, I have no idea what they're doing.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go down and spend a couple of weeks and do what they're doing. At least
Walk
get-
the
you know,
floor.
Walk the floor, absolutely. I think that's
Absolutely.
very important. And I think should you be elected to the board, I think you'll find that the department heads in this town are actually very open to that.
Okay.
I mean, you know, if you want to spend time with the chief of police or the fire chief or DPW, they're more than happy to do that, and they're very accommodating. And I think we're very lucky as a town because I've been involved for about 25 years,
Yep.
and I'll tell you that we do have very fine employees in this town.
Yep.
You know, and they do a nice job. Having said that, one of the things that you would be doing as a select board member, all of the board members have liaison assignments. So to
Okay.
your point about, you know, you can't just go to 2 meetings a year and develop a relationship.
Right.
The liaison assignments, at least in my view, are designed in part to establish some sort of a relationship
Sure.
between the select board and whichever group is being liaised to, if that's a correct word. I
Yeah.
don't know. It is now. I just
It is.
up.
Yep.
So,
Perfect.
are there any particular assignments, should you be elected, that you would be interested in pursuing? And generally, you might have 4 or 5 of these
Okay.
assignments. Yeah.
No, that-
Yeah.
So I, not knowing what the assignments are, I mean, I'm
There is
certain-
there is a liaison assignment to every major board.
Okay.
And some of the minor ones, okay? And some of the operational areas. So there are liaisons to school department, to DPW, and I'm on the Board of Assessors. We have a liaison person for us
Okay.
and so forth. So any area that might specifically interest you in terms
Certainly.
of an operation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'm keenly interested in the schools, the school board. I believe it's our schools that will draw people to Chelmsford, that people want to move here, raise their families. It's a good place to be from that standpoint. Any of the youth recreation activities, I'd like to be involved in those. I believed, I mean, this was our observation when our children were growing up, and it's still my observation today, that Chelmsford is a youth-friendly town, and that's a big part of its appeal. There's a lot of activities for youth.
Well, you were heavily invested in the sports program
Yep,
in town,
yep.
so you certainly have firsthand knowledge of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I want to see those programs prosper, so I'd like to be involved in that. Planning does have some appeal. You know, I've sat in on one planning board meeting, so I'm half the expert I am on the select board now. But it's interesting, you know, I'd like to hear more. I think the planning board fits well within the guidance of a strategic plan. So just off the top of my head,
Yeah.
those three.
Okay, that's good. You will be asked by the chair,
Okay.
but the chair gets to make the final determination, so you just may get an assignment. And the idea is for the major boards, the idea is that you really should try to attend their meetings.
Yep.
Okay, the minor boards, maybe not so much, but at least keep in touch with the board and the chair. And then the idea is that you report back to the board as a whole. Sometimes this will be done during the referral period at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Okay, can you update us on, let's say you're the school person.
Yeah.
Chuck, what's going on with the schools? And, you know, you spend 30 seconds or so, up to 45, updating the board. And
Yeah.
it's a very, I think it's very useful. I think that format is good. And it does help to establish good relationships.
Yep.
Years ago, the town side and the school side were not on very good terms,
Okay.
unfortunately, and I think a lot of it was due to the personalities of the former school superintendent and the former town manager. They didn't get along too well,
Yeah.
okay? And it was a problem. And over the years, that relationship has gotten much better. And to your point, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits from that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's essential. I mean, to me, the liaison assignments would be part of the education. The select board needs to look holistically at the town. You know, as I travel around the world to different Xylem locations, I have conversations with people, and, you know, I've explained it this way, that, you know, when they're looking at a local level, it's like, okay, so you're looking at it from the 400 employees that are at this site. When I look at it, I need to look at it in terms of all 17,000 Xylem employees.
Right, exactly.
So I've got to be at that level, but I need to hear what the 400 are concerned about. So there's a lot of different spots where the information comes from. I looked online. I didn't find an unabridged manual to being a Chelmsford Town Select person, so
I'm sorry you wasted your time.
that's okay. If I do find something, I'll let you know.
As far as I know, the only board that really does put out that kind of information is the Finance Committee.
Okay.
There is a manual
Yep.
on how to be a Finance Committee member, which is very helpful,
that.
okay? I think, though, if your board does develop a strategic plan,
Yep.
I think that might, going forward, serve as a sort of a basis for that, at least, you know, for that sort of a roadmap for how you should go about being a select person.
Sure.
So I think you've already given us some insight, but looking at the present board, how would your leadership style differ? I mean, you've given me some general indications, but can you be a little bit more specific?
So I can't comment on the individuals on the board.
Oh, no, I'm not, no.
I've shaken their hands.
Just generally speaking from your observation.
I'm direct. I'm to the point. Like I said, I think there is a time and a place for discussion, and, conflict can be healthy at times. I've always, in my role within Xylem and other roles, I've always encouraged diverse opinions. So I would encourage diverse opinions across the board, but then, as I stated earlier, when it's all said and done, we need to agree that we've made the right decision. Does that help?
Oh, I think yes, that helps, and I think that is entirely reasonable. You might have 5 people, 5 different opinions. At the end of the day, you know that you have to make a decision.
Single decision.
Correct.
Right.
And it's the art of compromise, I guess.
Yep.
If nothing else, you just have to. However long it takes to have that discussion, you have that discussion.
That's
because
true.
you are representing every single resident of the town.
That's right.
Not a particular constituency.
Yep.
And, sometimes we miss that. Okay, we watch various boards and we can almost say, okay, well, they're speaking for this person or that person.
Right.
And my particular point of view is, no, you're speaking for the whole town.
Everybody.
So I'll make a statement, and I'm going to see if you agree or disagree.
Okay.
I always felt that if you did a 3-year term on a board, if you didn't make one decision, or at least one decision, that went against your personal belief for the greater good of the town, you haven't done your job. Do you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And I would also, I'd take it one step further, that not every decision that the board makes is going to be a popular decision. There will be times when they're not popular, but they are in the best interest of the town.
And just based on our discussion here, it appears to me you would have absolutely no difficulty carrying that out and explaining the rationale for your decision. You have to have a thick skin.
I do.
Yeah.
And broad shoulders.
Well, I'll tell you, if you were in the export-import regulatory and compliance, you have a thick skin. Because there were many times in your business life you had to tell people no when they didn't want to hear that answer.
Yeah, and you know what I tell people is, and
Yeah.
I tell the people that work for me, it's easy to say no.
Yeah.
A lot of times, it's a lot harder to say yes. And part of our role is to push the envelope, get to yes when it's right for the business, and not break any laws while we're doing
exactly.
so.
And that's a good mindset to bring to the board. Very briefly, I wish I'd allowed a little bit more time. Do you have any opinion on the split tax rate?
I looked at it.
Okay.
And I support it. And
You support the split?
the split, yes. I looked at surrounding communities. Chelmsford's not bad from a rate standpoint. Now, I know you can't just look at the rate in isolation.
Right. But in terms of the degree of split, you're right.
Yeah.
Other towns are split at 75%, we're at 20, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's ever going to thank anyone for a tax bill or raising taxes, or if they do. I have as yet to thank the IRS for anything they've done. But I still pay my taxes. I think it's business and residents are symbiotic. They need each other, and everybody needs to shoulder what is a reasonable burden. It can't always fall on the residents, and you can't disproportionately have it fall on the businesses. I understand there are some exemptions for small businesses, and that's perfectly appropriate. Large businesses, landlords, the buildings, I really don't think the split rate has anything to do with the vacancy rate in Chelmsford.
Okay, that's a fair answer, and thank you. You've got 30 seconds to look into that camera and ask for the vote.
All right, well, first, Sam, I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I want to encourage everybody to please go out and vote. I believe voting is a privilege and one that we should embrace, and I ask respectfully that one of your votes be for me, for Select Board, and if you're in Precinct 9, also for Precinct 9 Town Meeting Representative. Thank you.
That's good, and you remembered to ask for your precinct vote, too, which is wonderful. Thank you. That's